So I am joined now by Roosh Williams, who was one of the very first people I reached out to when I started this podcast because I know him to be one of the most thoughtful sort of Houston sports scions. And it says a lot about Roosh that he was one of the very first people that got back to me and was open to the idea of coming on the show, even when I didn't have a show yet, right? I didn't have a Twitter following at all. I had nothing. And so that says a lot about him. And I really appreciate him joining me. So, Roosh, before I get to my first question, if anyone listening or watching this is not familiar with your work, where's the best way to find you? Where's the best place to find you on the internet?
Yeah, and thanks for reaching out and having me on, Daniel. I appreciate it. I think the best way to find my stuff, man, just go to Twitter. That's really all I use. I don't use Instagram or Facebook or anything. Go to Twitter. It's Roosh, Roosh Williams. Roosh rhymes with swoosh. Just use an R. Roosh Williams. And then I do a Rockets podcast called State of the Rockets. So if you're into that, check that out. I haven't done it in a while, but I do a podcast for Ball is Life called the Noble and Roosh Show. It's more of a general NBA podcast. Sometimes we interview NBA players. Sometimes we interview beat writers for different teams, things like that. So I have an NBA podcast, and then which you can get anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever. And then I have a Rockets podcast, so you can get on YouTube. You can also get anywhere you listen to podcasts, but on YouTube as well, we do a video. So yeah, check that out.
Awesome. So I started this podcast, and it is a Rockets and Texans podcast. They're my two favorite teams. I love the Astros, but I don't follow baseball closely enough that I felt I could speak intelligently to it. But it struck me that both teams were in a similar spot. Just off the top of my head, they both recently parted ways with their recognizable sort of franchise icons and J.J. Watt and James Harden and DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson, if you want to put them in that category. Both teams have new first-time GMs. Both teams have apparently patient ownership, which is going to allow them to see through a proper rebuild. Both teams are projected to have a significant amount of cap room in the upcoming offseason. Both teams have some question marks at head coach. Both teams selected third in their respective drafts this past year. Both teams have questions at their signal caller position, right? Is Davis Mills a starter? Is Kevin Porter Jr. a point guard? Both teams have 1 win and 4 losses. Last year, both teams had a winning percentage of 24%. So I ask you this, Roosh, which team is better positioned in your mind moving forward to get back to relevance, to get back to that contender status?
That's a good question. I didn't realize there were that many like very specific parallels. I knew there were
Right.
some broad parallels. I didn't know it got like that specific. Third pick, 1-4 record, 24% win percentage. That's interesting. You know, I'm mostly Rockets, Astros.
Okay.
I have detached from the Texans emotionally because if you haven't at this point, then I respect you because they put us through a lot.
A
It's
masochist.
it's weird, yeah, right. It's weird because the Texans, I don't understand what the Texans are doing. I don't necessarily think that they're like off base or whatever. I just legitimately don't understand. I would consider myself a Rockets expert. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how the Texans are maneuvering, right? Like they just I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kamier Grugier Hill,
Right.
right? Like I thought he was their best linebacker, and their linebackers aren't good, but they let him go. They seem to make like these kind of moves that make you look back at, well, could you not extract any type of asset or anything from that? And you just had to like cut bait. So I don't know. I like what they did in the draft. I'm still unsure about Stingley versus Sauce Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a talent evaluator. We'll see. I hope they got the pick right. I like some of the later picks. Hopefully Christian Harris can be a contributor. Hopefully John Mechie gets healthy and can be a contributor. I think we're seeing Jalen Petrie and Damian Pierce immediately contribute.
Right.
But football I think is an easier sport to immediately bounce back in because if you just get that superstar quarterback talent in the draft as on a rookie deal, you can build around them, and
Right.
you can expend your resources to build around them. So in theory, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of get that going on the fly, especially with all the draft capital you have. But at the same time in the NBA, if you get, if you draft one LeBron James, then like, cool, you're on the way back. So it's tough. I'm high on the Rockets' future, but basketball is so traditionally dominated by, the same stars for stretches of time. So it's like, will the Rockets get out of being the worst team in the league to being like middle of the pack? Maybe. Will they get back to a legitimate contender status? I don't know. That's hard to predict. Whereas I could see the Texans maybe over the course of 3 years, like getting things on track, going 10-6, or I guess now 10-7 or 11-6, or,
Right.
being like a decent team that can maybe win the wild card and then get, kind of get into the second round. I feel like that's a little more, I could see that happening maybe quicker than the Rockets, but also conversely, I could see the Rockets talent hitting, and then, they're one trade away because they have the draft capital and they go get a big fish or something like that. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're back. So I think it's a coin flip, honestly.
Okay.
Maybe a
I'm
cop
I'm
out
kind of
answer,
with
but
you. That's why I asked you. I didn't want to ask you. I wanted to go a little bit less prosaic with the questions. I know you talk Rockets all day, and a lot of the people listening to this will have heard you talk about the Rockets. So I wanted to go a little bit off base, with the questions a little bit. So on that same note, I know that Nick Caserio, general manager for the Texans, is the decision maker. I think he's been given sort of free reign to make decisions, and Cal McNair, the owner, probably rubber stamps those decisions that Caserio wants to make. When I think about the Texans or the Rockets front office, um, you have Rafael Stone, who was general counsel, and then he was promoted to general manager. Um, but I'm not sure, do you have a better sense of who's actually making the decisions? If somebody calls with a trade offer to the Rockets, is it a consortium of casino people and seafood people and Rafael Stone's in the room? And like, how are those decisions made? Do you know?
are you getting at the Fertitas?
Yes.
So my understanding is that, my understanding is that Tillman Fertitta is pretty hands off, believe it or not. He's not on like a day-to-day ops kind of thing with the Rockets. My understanding is that he has his people hired and he's trusting in his people. So Rafael makes decisions. They have Eli Whitus, who was held over from the previous regime with Maury and all them. So my understanding is that, it's Rafael and Eli and the other folks that they have in the building. The Rockets have kind of a varied approach. They have some analytics for sure. They're analytics driven for sure. And then they also have, Rafael making decisions as well. Sometimes in lockstep, sometimes maybe not. I'm not sure, but Tillman is not involved. They, as far as I can see, Tillman has bought into Rafael's plan for rebuilding, and
Okay.
that's what they're trying to do. So,
And that's the most you can ask, right? Because it seemed like when he bought the team, I had a lot of misgivings, right, with his personality and sort of his past. Like he's going to be very involved, and it was a little bit scary. But he's proven to be hands off in a good way, and I'm optimistic there. So I will hew a little bit more to Rockets questions since you are more of a Rockets centric guy. Here's the toughest one I could come up with. Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr. come to blows in the locker room, hypothetically, right? They have irreconcilable differences. One of them has slept with the other significant other. Something horrible has happened. One of them has to be moved. And the consortium of casino and seafood people reach out to you in your DMs and say, hey, what do you think we should do? Who should we hang on to here? How are you responding to that DM?
well, first and foremost, it's very early on Jabari Smith. So I gotta it it. I've gotten to see a year of Jalen, and I've only gotten to see like 4 or 5 games with Jabari. Right.
Right.
I think Jalen, as currently constructed, has the higher offensive ceiling. Right. I think he's super polished. The skill set's there. He can do every move in the book. He can shoot. He can dunk. He needs to get better at finishing at the rim. He needs to get better at, using drawing contact and finishing through contact at the rim. Hopefully he'll get there. But everything else in his game's polished. Jabari, on the other hand, is not as polished, but his three-point shooting is excellent. And his defensive presence is very real. And he's 6'11", right? You can't teach height. So those are the two things you're balancing. Jalen has a higher offensive ceiling and more potential offensively. I could see the kid averaging 25 plus a night legitimately. I don't think Jabari ever will average 25 a night. How much do you trade that off with the defensive presence and the fact that Jabari is 6'11" and could really grow into like, a legit like 6'11", 240, force that can also shoot and score. So it really depends on what you build around them. I think Jalen's the sexier piece, but I do think it, to some degree, winning games, maybe there's an argument for Jabari. I think Jabari's already kind of come in and given the defense somewhat of, they're not, fully grown up, but they're starting to kind of trend up a little bit. So I don't know. It depends on how I'd view building the team. It's hard to go out and get a Jalen Green. they don't just grow on trees, at least good ones, guys that with that skill set grow on trees maybe, but the elite that put up the elite types of numbers don't necessarily, but you could say the same for Jabari Smith. So at this moment, I'd probably go Jalen Green, but I really like the two of them as two core building blocks.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Shifting to Şengün, you get a call from, once again, general manager Roosh gets a call from a fringe playoff team, whoever that is. Let's say that's Portland or Denver or whoever you want to say is on the fringe, and they offer you this year's first round pick for Alperen Şengün straight up. What are you saying?
Where's that pick?
Well, they're a fringe playoff team, so not in the lottery.
No.
Just
straight up?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So Şengün to you has exceeded his initial trade value to this point.
I think so. I think he's a talented player. I don't know what his ceiling is going to be. I don't ultimately know what his limitations are going to turn him into in terms of how you build around him or how you use him to build around others. But I think he's worth more than like the 15th pick in the draft, or, he was the 16th pick, right? So I think he's worth more than that right now. I mean, the next draft will be deep, but I mean, this is a guy that's proven he can go out and give you a double-double and a few assists at the very least. He's already one of the best post-up players in the NBA. Now, posting up is a dying art, and I understand that. But I don't even think they've begun to tap into his full potential to the extent that I would trade him for where you took him.
Will they tap into that full potential with this 5-out Stephen Silas led offensive system that we have?
If they continue to go 5-out, I don't think they'll tap into his potential. I think the best way to tap into his potential is to post him up, force doubles, kick the ball out to shooters, get it moving, and then also to get him in the high post and run action around him and use those screens, use alternate bodies to create space and use his passing ability over the top.
Do you think they will do that?
I'm not optimistic yet. They got to prove that to me, right? So far, they're using him as a post-up guy off the bench, so that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they fully tapped into what he can do from the high post, and I don't think that they fully tapped into his passing. Because when you're posting up, your angles are kind of cut off, right? Is this audio only, or do you do video as well?
I do some video stuff, sure.
So look, let's say this is the 3-point line. Sorry for anyone who's listening on audio, but let's say this is the 3-point line. Here's the basket down here, right? 3-point line, basket. If you post Şengün up right here, and let's say you got KPJ up here, Jabari here, Şengün here. KPJ gives the ball to Jabari, and then you got Eric Gordon, Jalen Green. You get the ball to Jabari to Şengün. His angles to pass over here to Gordon on the elbow and to Green in the corner, those are cut off, right? But you can still force a double team or a collapse from two good catch and shoot shooters in Jabari and Jalen, and then force the ball out to get it moving. But these angles are cut off, so they're only using him in the post. So his passing is a little limited. If you use him in the high post and you run action around it, now he can spray from any angle, right? So will they do it? We'll see. They haven't done it yet enough. They've done it at times, but not enough. What's interesting is when DJ Augustin was on the team last season, DJ Augustin seemed to really have like that chemistry with Şengün. He'd give him the ball and cut, and Şengün would find him, and vice versa. So you just need someone who knows that, who can read that.
That Luther head knows for the game.
kind of.
Watching the last couple of games, I couldn't help but think, like, I brought up Mike D'Antoni. I saw you tweeted out Rick Adelman's name, which I thought was a great pull for that high post, that sort of offensive read and react sort of stuff that is so much fun to watch. And I do not find our offense fun to watch right now. Like, I'm really having to scrape for, watching Jabari Smith's development, watching Jalen Green's development, watching KPJ learning how to find people, not finding people, etc. If we were to move on from Stephen Silas, is there a coach or is there a type of coach that's out there right now that you would want the team to target?
Man, I don't stay in touch with like the coaching pipeline, the talent that's in the coaching pipeline. I feel like every year there's a new assistant who did something, at a G League level or at the end of the bench for the Raptors or, whatever. Right. Just a situation I'm not plugged in enough to really know. So I don't have a name. I would give you something basic, like a basic answer, like a Quinn Snyder. That's a proven commodity. Would he come for a rebuild over here? I doubt it. But I would just like to see movement, man. I mean, look, for example, the Spurs, right? The Spurs are a young team. The Spurs don't really have high-end talent, certainly not drafted at the level that the Rockets had. And the Spurs assist on 70 to 71% of their field goals made. So that tells me that the ball's moving. That tells me that bodies are moving. Right now, the Rockets assist on 50 to 50.5% of their field goals made. And that tells me the ball's not skipping. And that matches the eye test that we're watching. The ball's not skipping, bodies aren't moving. It's just isolation play. So how do you, to answer your question of what kind of coach I'd like to see a coach that can adjust to different personnel instead of trying to fit the personnel into the one thing they want to do, which is heliocentric isolation basketball at the moment.
Right.
And then 2, a coach that really puts a value and emphasis on moving off the ball. Like, I don't expect these kids to execute at a high level, but I'd like to see them try. I'd like to see them try to run around or set, a pin down or an off-ball screen, or like with this same design right here that I was talking about. Let's go back to this. Şengün in the post, KPJ up top, Jabari on this elbow, Eric Gordon on this elbow, Jalen Green in the corner. You get the ball to KPJ, you swing it to Jabari, you're about to post up Şengün up. Before you send that pass, you run a double screen, Eric Gordon, KPJ, and you spring Jalen open. KPJ peels off this, right? So now you have options in movement. Jalen come to get the ball, defense is moving, KPJ peels to the basket, people are moving, and you're going to force Şengün's defender to do something. Or you post Şengün up as this is happening, and now all of a sudden it's a pass to Şengün and he hits KPJ peeling. Or it's a pass to Şengün, Jalen comes off this and then crashes. And it's, like something where people are moving off the ball and creating opportunities, right? Because if you're just isolating, that's the hardest shot to get. We saw that with the old Rockets, right? I don't know if you remember, a lot of people used to say, oh, I hate watching James Harden. I hate watching the Rockets play. And we were all like, hey, man, this is awesome. We're kicking ass. But that was the case because they were good at it. What we're seeing now is that offense, but we're not good at it. And it truly is hard to watch. So, I would like a coach that just understands and values off-ball movement, because that's how you can overcome a lack of talent. It's how you can overcome a lack of maturity if you just force the defense to move. Right now, we're standing still. Defenses aren't moving. And Jalen can bail us out every now and then. KPJ can bail us out every now and then. Sometimes Alp gets a one-on-one post-up, and that's a bucket. But it's not a reliable, fun, smart offense. So
I'm with you. And that was my takeaway from the first Jazz game. I'm watching that game, and even though we did win that game, it was like, man, everything is so damn hard. It's like you watch Jalen Green, how fast he is, and some of those when he just blows by guys straight to the hoop, and you're like, man, he makes it look so easy, but the offense makes it look so difficult. Why can't you pair someone with those skills with a system that sort of makes it easier for him? And then I hear you on a Twitter space, I want to say maybe yesterday, and that was one of your first points, is everything. There's no easy looks that this offense is producing, and those young guys, man, how many possessions do we need to see Eric Gordon launching a 3 from 5 feet behind the? We've seen that. We saw that.
I don't want to
5 years
see that.
ago.
All respect to Eric Gordon, but I would really just, I never want to see it again.
What does that accomplish, right? Other than maybe like marginally improving his trade value, if he can hit some of those shots, it does nothing for development. It does nothing for chemistry. It does not. I don't get it. Why is Eric Gordon shooting so much?
And to back this up, so it's small sample size, only 5 games, but last year's offense finished around 108 points per 100 possessions. That's offensive rating. An offensive rating measures how many points you score per 100 possessions. Right. The Rockets were 26 last season, 108 per. This season through 5 games so far, they're 106 points per 100 possessions. So they're two points worse per 100 possessions. They're still 26th in the season. So no growth ranking wise. And a statistical dip if you compare last season to this season. Clearly, I understand it's a very tiny sample size, but it's basically the eye test kind of slowly game by game matching up matching up to the data that we're seeing, right? So yeah, I've probably said this a million times, so I apologize if I sound like a broken record, but easy buckets, dude. Good teams get easy buckets. Great teams get easy buckets, and they have reliable options for hard buckets, and that's why they're so difficult to beat. The Rockets do neither of those things. Every action that's generated is behind the three-point line. No one is catching the ball, crashing to the basket. We put Jalen and Kevin and Eric in positions where they can get a downhill bucket, but it's all generated behind the three-point line. It's like 2 stagger screens, and then you get the dribble handoff to Jalen Green, and then he's going downhill. But he never catches it. Like, back to this, dude. You got guys out here. Put Jalen, in this corner or over here. Give him a screen and let him curl around and catch it at the free throw line. Simple. Rise and shoot.
Right.
Catch and go. without having to go 3 levels from the 3-point line. Catch and then triple threat. And then defenses on their heels. Options, Jabari Smith in college would nail the mid-range shot. I haven't seen the ball once to him in the elbow, just so he can face up from a little bit closer than the 3-point line and use his height. Go give a screen to him, switch a defender onto him that's 6'6" or 6'7", and go give him the ball and let him just rise up over them and shoot. Simple. Doesn't mean it's going to go in. Doesn't mean it's going to perfectly work, but I haven't even seen the attempt, and that is my issue.
I couldn't agree more. I am mindful of your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. It means a lot to me. It really does. I will close with one last question, and that is just going to be well, first of all, please plug anything again that you have that you want to throw out there, and also World Series prediction.
Oof. So that's the last question, World Series prediction?
That's it, man.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it. Whenever you get this put up, tag me and I'll retweet it for you.
Thanks, man.
So Roosh Williams, ROOSH Williams, Twitter, YouTube, State of the Rockets, easiest way to find my stuff. We also do this thing called Rockets Watch. Check that out. Just tweet at me. Usually I respond. Sometimes I just don't see it because that's the nature of Twitter, but usually I try to respond. World Series predictions. I got to be honest with you, man. I'm terrified. I'm just that way. I'm just always pessimistic because Houston sports has conditioned us to expect the worst at the worst times, and I cannot shake the weirdness of facing another underdog team from the NL East in the World Series. So I don't feel comfortable at all. Now, 2019 was a bit of a fluke. They lost those first 2 games at home. They won the next 3, somehow lost those last 2 at home, but they were facing Scherzer and Strasburg, and those guys are like A+, right? Nola and Wheeler, I wouldn't say are A+, and I don't know them like that. I'm not a baseball expert, so I'm using some of my own knowledge, and I'm also using some of the knowledge that I've heard other people say and that makes sense to me. So don't want to take full credit for my opinions on this, but Nola and Wheeler are more like A-, B+, A. They're not that level, and then their bullpen is shaky. Also, a point that someone else made, can't remember who, but I thought this was interesting. The 2019 Astros were the most talented by far, but they were front runners in some ways, right? They even in the postseason, they went to 5 in the ALDS against Tampa. They came to Houston for game 1 of the ALCS and lost, I think 7-0. And then they won game 2 with Correa's walk-off at the end, walk-off home run. And then they kind of picked up, even Altuve's walk-off, they were up, what was it, 3-2, 4-2? I can't remember. And they blew it. I think LeMahieu hit like a 2-run bomb or something in the 9th. They almost blew it. If Altuve didn't walk that thing off, could have been disaster. Could have gone to 7. And who knows what happens then. And then, of course, they lose the first 2 in the World Series. They win the next 3, which showed some major balls.
Right.
And then they lost the last 2. These Astros seem to be just a little different. And Greinke also wasn't he pitched well in game 7. He wasn't the same Greinke. So I think 1 through 4, these starting pitcher, I think these Astros are a little stronger and scarier. But I thought that was interesting. These Astros kind of have that no fear comeback. If you put them down, they will come back, right? We saw it in game 1 of the ALDS against Seattle with Jordan's walk-off. We saw it against in game 4, the closeout game against the Yankees. They went down 3-0 or whatever and came right back, and went down again and came right back, And then also in 2021, I want to point out, I just think the Braves were a better team. I think maybe in the moment we didn't have sight of that, but if you really look at it, that pitching, once Lance went down, that pitching staff got destroyed outside of Framber's gem in Boston. I think it was game 5 when he pitched 8 innings on the road to basically, send it back to Houston 3-2. Outside of that performance, they got smashed. They got slapped around. And, the number 2 in that series, the number 2 on that staff after Lance was Luis Garcia. And Luis Garcia is not even in this rotation. So, there's something to that. I think by the time they got to the World Series, they were just gassed. And I think you saw it. And Atlanta had Charlie Morton, who only pitched part of game 1, but then they had Max Fried, who was lights out. And then they had Ian Anderson, their bullpen, Minter, Will Smith when he was in form. So I just think they were a better team. When I look at this World Series, I look at the Phillies. I've been trying to do a lot of research on it because I don't watch the Phillies, right? So I've been trying to understand their team. Seems like their lineup is kind of similar to the Yankees. In some ways, kind of similar to the Astros. Could be a wash. I think the Astros are better, but you never know what version of Altuve you're going to get. You never know if Jordan's going to be in a slump until the last game of the series like he was in the ALCS. You never know.
Right.
So all things considered, I'd call that a wash. Starting pitching, I think you could call the games 1 and 2 a wash. Wheeler, Framber, JV, Nola. After that, I think it's Houston's advantage. Houston also has the advantage in the bullpen. And then I think what's not being talked about enough that could really, if all else is equal, what's not being talked about enough is Philly's defense is not good. Kyle Schwarber is not a good left fielder. Nick Castellanos is not a good right fielder. I think he's like negative 0.2 WAR for the season or something. They just have question marks defensively. I think they were like the 25th best or worst defense, something like that. Just not good, which you don't usually see at this level. For reference, I think the Mariners were 12th. I think the Yankees were first, believe it or not. And you saw without Hicks and without DJ LeMahieu, they made a couple mistakes. Harrison Bader dropping that pop-up.
Right.
Kiner Falefa, instead of turning the double play, screwing that whole thing up, and the Astros took advantage. So it's the kind of thing where if you're a team that gives free outs to the Astros, they will burn you. Now, we'll see what happens. The Phillies have been hot. I'm hoping this 4-day layoff kind of screws them over and takes some of that juice away. They're very heavy on Bryce Harper. Kyle Schwarber has also, basically their guys have been going boom or bust with no, like their averages and their OPS hasn't, I don't know about their OPS, but their averages haven't been all that good. Like Rhys Hoskins, I think, is batting like 182 in the postseason, but 5 of the hits he has are home runs. So it's
right.
So I think it's kind of that. And if you can avoid Bryce Harper killing you, I'm starting to feel comfortable and less scared. But Verlander's struggles in the World Series scare me. Their top 2 pitchers are very good, so that scares me. So I say all that to say, I'm scared. I will go Astros in 7.
7. Okay.
7. I just think it'll be hard to avoid one of those. It'll be a weird series, Some shit's gonna happen, or the Astros won't capitalize, and then it'll turn around and it'll turn into a Bryce Harper big player, just something, right? Where they can't go 11-0, right? So I just feel like Philly's got something special to it. It'll be a tough series. I hope the Astros. I think the Astros are objectively better, but I just hope they play like it this time. So
yeah, that is one thing that strikes me. My prediction is Astros in 6, and the momentum, how big a factor momentum is in playoff baseball. It's not like basketball, right, where the better team tends to win a 7-game series. Right. You get weird shit in baseball where all of a sudden you can't hit the ball, or Verlander gets in his head, or whatever happens. So to me, the pitching, like you noted, is the big difference. The Astros are significantly better. And if their pitching holds up and does what it's capable of doing, I think the Astros win, and I think they win. Like I said, in 5, I'll say 6.
I think they got to win game 1. They've never won game 1 of the World Series. I think if they win game 1, it positions them very well. If they lose, then I'm going to be very worried. But look, got to keep it real. That Yankee series could have gone differently without the wind. I know the wind was a joke, right. It was a meme,
right?
But I mean, it took away a couple Aaron Judge home runs in key moments. That goes both ways. Mancini had a ball that kind of died that probably would have been a home run. Jeremy Pena had one that kind of died that probably would have gone yard. So it evens out a little bit. The Yankees were able to score some of their runs in the first inning of game 4 because of the win. Like, for example, Gleyber Torres had that pop-up that just dropped and it scored a couple runs. So it goes both ways. But we got to keep it real. Like, that series could have looked different if that win didn't give us the slightest bit of luck. And then also, I think it was at the end of game 2, whichever one we won 3-2, I think, or no, 4-2. I can't remember. One of the games. The final out was, I think it was right before Judge came up. It was either right before Judge came up or it was right before Stanton came up. Something, a big moment. It was a line drive straight. It hit the base before Altuve caught it. It hit the base. And when that happens, obviously the ball can skip any which way. It just happened to skip right into his glove.
Right.
Like, whatever luck happened, the trajectory of that ball, once it hit second base, it just went straight up. It didn't go like ping or ping. And had that happened, it would have been a runner on base. And I think Presley's pitch count was up at that point or something. It just would have been like a much hairier scenario. I think it's very underlooked. It's part of the game, so it is what it is. But if you're parsing through those little things, I remember in real time watching that ball hit the base and just holding my breath, like, oh, and then he got, and it was over. But it's just one of those things where it's like, yes, we beat the shit out of them. But if you go through and find these little things, I'm a pessimist, so I just look for those things. But either way, we'll see what the Phillies do. Hopefully it's not one of those series. Hopefully the best team, in this case, the Astros, wins. And hopefully they really just lose some of that momentum with this 4-day layoff. Because remember, they were the last team to clinch. They went straight into the wild card, the postseason against the Cardinals, and they didn't skip a beat. They've just been running off this high, off this adrenaline.
Right.
And hopefully with that coming down a little bit, they kind of regress back to, the 87 win team that they ended up being. So we'll see.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for coming.
Daniel, I appreciate it. Like I said, tag me. I'll retweet it for you. Just give me a heads up before you do, or, shoot me a message so it's on my radar. And yeah, I appreciate it, man. Best of luck with the pod.
Thanks, man. Take care.
You too, dude.